The winter holidays in Lawrence, Kansas promised a mix of family warmth and eerie excitement. I had planned to visit my girlfriend Emily and her family. Emily's father, Mr. Thompson, was an adventurer at heart, often exploring the local haunts and sharing stories of their hidden mysteries. Her parents, night owls by nature, found joy in nocturnal excursions, often dragging Emily, and by extension, me, into their late-night escapades. One particularly cold night, Mr. Thompson suggested a visit to Stool Cemetery, a place shrouded in local legends and whispers of the supernatural. It was about 20 minutes from their house, and curiosity got the better of us. Emily's mother chose to stay home, citing an uneasy feeling. So, it was just Emily, her father and me, setting out into the darkness at 4 a.m. The drive was silent, the roads deserted, and the night eerily still. We parked near a decrepit church across from the cemetery. The town of Stool was notorious for its tight control over the cemetery, often stationing a police officer to ward off curious outsiders. But tonight, the place was deserted. As we stepped out of the car, a heavy silence enveloped us. The air seemed dense, stifling the wind and amplifying the crunch of our footsteps on the frosty ground. We crossed the street and entered the cemetery, our flashlights casting long shadows that danced across the gravestones. We wandered through the cemetery, Emily and her father sharing tales of the site's dark history. At a turn, we encountered a dead tree standing alone, a sinister sentinel at the base of a hill. At the peak, the ruins of an old church loomed, its walls crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. Emily recounted the local legend. The church was destroyed in the 90s because it attracted too many vandals, especially on Halloween. The most infamous tale involved throwing a glass bottle at the back wall of the church. If it didn't break, it was said that Satan himself would come and drag you to hell. We explored the ruins, moving debris and inspecting the stones for any sign of the supernatural. After about 30 minutes, we found nothing of note, just some strange scratches on the stones that seemed too deliberate to be caused by animals. We decided to venture behind the church, where the dead trees stood in eerie silence. The quiet was so profound that we could hear a car approaching from miles away. We turned off our flashlights, hiding in the shadows until it passed. As we resumed our search, Emily found a glass bottle lying in the grass near the church's edge. She seemed uneasy as I bent down to pick it up. Her father shone his flashlight on the bottle, illuminating it in the darkness. As soon as I touched it, a strange sound filled the air. It was a fizzing noise, like gas escaping from a sealed container, but the bottle was empty. The sound seemed to come from about 15 feet away, near the back of the church's rubble. We shone our flashlights toward the noise, but saw nothing. Then, a few seconds later, we heard a gargling sound, followed by a series of clicks, like an animal, but unlike any we had heard before. Mr. Thompson, a lifelong resident of Kansas, was baffled. Whatever it was, it should have been scared off by our presence, but it stayed hidden in the darkness. I dropped the bottle, and we continued our exploration, taking photos in hopes of capturing something unusual. When we reviewed the pictures later, one of them revealed a strange, distorted face lurking in the background. Fear gripped us, and we decided it was time to leave. As we approached the car, we noticed the interior lights were on. It was the only light in the surrounding darkness. We checked the doors, all locked and closed. None of us remembered leaving the lights on. In fact, we distinctly recalled turning them off when Mr. Thompson was changing the batteries in his flashlight. The drive back was tense. We were silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. Emily's grip on my hand was tight, her fear palpable. We couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, something that didn't want us there. When we got home, we reviewed the photos again. The face in the background was clearer now, its eyes hollow and filled with malice. Emily's mother, seeing our pale faces and hearing our story, insisted we cleanse ourselves with sage and salt. a ritual she believed would ward off any lingering spirits. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Objects moved on their own, whispers filled the house at night, and shadows danced in the corners of our vision. Emily's mother performed the cleansing ritual repeatedly, but the disturbances persisted. Mr. Thompson delved deeper into the history of Stool Cemetery, uncovering stories of disappearances and unexplained deaths. He learned that the cemetery was once a site for occult rituals, and the church was rumored to be a gateway to hell. Determined to find answers, we decided to return to Stool Cemetery. This time, Emily's mother joined us, armed with protective talismans and herbs. We arrived just before midnight, the atmosphere even more oppressive than before. We retraced our steps, reaching the dead tree and the ruins of the church. Emily's mother began a ritual, chanting words of protection and sprinkling salt around the perimeter. As she did, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread settled over us. Suddenly, the fizzing sound returned, louder and more menacing. The ground beneath us trembled, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was the face from the photograph, its eyes burning with hatred. Emily's mother stood her ground, continuing her chant. The figure advanced, its form shifting and writhing. We joined in the chant, our voices blending with hers, creating a barrier of light and sound. The figure halted, its eyes narrowing. With a final ear-piercing shriek, it dissolved into the night, leaving us breathless and shaken. We hurried back to the car, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as we left the cemetery behind. The ride home was silent, the weight of our experience settling over us. Back at the house, Emily's mother completed the cleansing ritual, sealing the doors and windows with protective symbols. The disturbances ceased, but the memory of that night remained, a dark shadow on our souls. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Thompson discovered the identity of the figure. It was a man named Jonathan Blackwood, a cult leader who had vanished in the 1920s. He had conducted rituals in the church, seeking to open a portal to the underworld. His spirit, twisted by his dark deeds, lingered in the ruins, drawn to those who dared to disturb his resting place. We moved on with our lives, forever changed by our encounter. The experience brought us closer, binding us with a shared secret. Emily and I often visited her parents, finding comfort in their presence. The legend of Stool Cemetery lived on, a cautionary tale for those who sought to uncover its mysteries. We knew the truth, and it was a burden we carried, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of our world. Years later, we returned to Lawrence with our children, sharing stories of our adventures and the lessons we had learned. Stool Cemetery stood as a silent sentinel, its secrets buried beneath the earth. We never spoke of that night again, but its echoes lingered, a testament to the power of the unknown and the resilience of the human spirit. Halloween night had always been a time of excitement and adventure for me, Aaron, and Michael. We were 13, full of curiosity, and living in a brand new suburb, freshly built to accommodate our growing town. The changes around us were evident, especially at the cemetery, which lay a bit off the main road. The graveyard, now on the town's edge, was mostly empty since not many people had passed away yet. We decided that exploring the quiet graveyard would be far more thrilling than the usual trick-or-treating. Dressed in costumes, we first gathered candy from various houses, mixing it up to make it look like we'd been trick-or-treating as our parents expected. Then, we embarked on our journey, a mile off the usual path. To reach the cemetery, we had to climb over a fence around a large pond used for draining water from the freeway. We walked along the pond's edge and climbed another fence to enter the cemetery. It was pitch dark, and we figured no one would see us. But we didn't realize someone was following us. The cemetery was super empty and eerie. Used to seeing graveyards filled with tombstones, this one's empty grass unsettled us. Bored after a while, but not wanting to go home yet, we sat against some gravestones, careful not to sit directly on any graves. We were just sitting there, talking and acting like regular kids, when suddenly we heard a sound behind us. The sound seemed like someone calling our names, sending chills down our spines. We turned around, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing, just gravestones. The wailing continued, now calling our names individually. We thought we were alone, so maybe it was a ghost angry at us for trespassing. We approached the sound cautiously, each of us holding pieces of broken granite for protection. The voice pinpointed itself closer and closer, then said something that struck us deeply. Aaron's grandmother was very sick, and that's one reason we were here, to help him forget his troubles. The voice claimed to be Aaron's grandmother's ghost. Aaron froze, overwhelmed by a jumble of strong emotions. He yelled back, trying to deny it, but tears streamed down his face. Suddenly, the voice stopped crying and started laughing. It no longer sounded like a woman's ghost, but more like a sneaky boy's laughter. We spotted someone creeping out from behind a gravestone. It was a bully from our neighborhood, older than us by a few years. Aaron's sadness turned into rage. He stormed towards the bully, who was laughing so hard he didn't see Aaron's anger. Aaron tackled the boy to the ground and started hitting him with the piece of granite he had grabbed earlier. Michael and I, shocked and scared, watched as Aaron hit the bully repeatedly. We hated how this kid bullied us, but we didn't realize until too late that Aaron was using the gravestone piece as a weapon. Realizing the severity, we pulled Aaron away, trying to calm him down. Aaron, understanding what he had done, panicked and tried to wake the bully, shaking him and yelling his name. Michael called 911, explaining the situation. Within 10 minutes, the police and medics arrived. They checked the bully and told us he was unconscious, his condition severe. They rushed him to the hospital. Fortunately, he survived, but the doctors said if Michael hadn't called 911, things could have turned worse. The incident haunted us. Aaron's guilt and our fear of the consequences weighed heavily on our minds. Our parents were furious and scared, grounding us for what felt like an eternity. The bully recovered, but remained distant, no longer tormenting us. The cemetery, once a place of childish curiosity, became a symbol of our darkest night. Years passed, but the memory of that Halloween night lingered. Aaron, Michael, and I grew apart, each of us dealing with the trauma in our way. Aaron, especially, struggled with guilt and anger, often visiting the cemetery alone, seeking some form of redemption. One day, Aaron approached me with a plan. He wanted to confront the bully, now a man, and apologize. He believed it was the only way to find peace. Reluctantly, I agreed to help him. We found the bully, now living a quiet life, still marked by that night. Aaron, with tears in his eyes, apologized, explaining how deeply sorry he was for his actions. The bully, surprised and moved, forgave him, revealing his own regrets for tormenting us. The confrontation was cathartic. It lifted a weight off our shoulders, allowing us to move forward. Aaron, especially, found a sense of closure, finally able to let go of the guilt that had plagued him for years. With the past behind us, we began to rebuild our lives. Aaron pursued a career in counseling, helping others deal with their traumas. Michael became a paramedic, inspired by the medics who saved the bully that night. As for me, I became a writer, sharing our story as a cautionary tale. In the mid-2000s, the Greenwood Cemetery in southwest Decatur, Illinois, was known as one of the scariest places in the Midwest. It had a history that could send chills down anyone's spine. Starting as a burial ground, it later became a mass grave for Civil War soldiers and had connections to cult activities. A great flood had washed away many graves long ago, adding to its eerie reputation. Celia, my sister, had always been fascinated by the macabre. Raised by our great-grandparents, who were kind but deeply religious, her interest in creepy things often caused friction. She moved to Decatur, which was becoming a place filled with crime and chaos, much like it is now. Her new house had a creepy basement with a dirt floor. The previous owner, an old man, had passed away there, and when our mom visited, She mentioned everything looked dark, like it had been burnt. Celia was struggling with life and money problems. To escape, she began going on ghost hunts with her friends. Greenwood Cemetery became her sanctuary in a twisted way. She'd go there at midnight with her loyal dog Brutus, who was still alive and a great companion. Initially, they didn't experience anything too scary, just some weird noises now and then. One night, Celia and her friends decided to explore deeper. They took lots of pictures, and one of them, standing by a light pole, knocked on it, asking if anyone was there to knock back. Nothing happened immediately, but a while later, they heard two loud knocks. They turned around, but saw nothing. Suddenly, they all felt like time had stopped. Something made them turn their heads towards a gravel road on the other side of a fence. There, they saw two dark shapes running down the road. These figures made no noise, didn't breathe, and seemed like misty clouds. Frozen in fear, they watched the shapes until they vanished. Then, they ran back to their car, covering the mile in record time. Later, Celia researched and found out that others had seen these ghostly dogs before, but it was a rare occurrence. The pictures they took that night were packed with colorful orbs of all sizes, but they never made copies. Emboldened by their previous experience, they decided to return to the cemetery, heading to the scariest part known as Hell's Hollow. They acted tough, taunting the spirits and saying the place wasn't as scary as they thought. Suddenly, a terrifying scream echoed from the sky, like a woman being torn apart. They fled again, running back to their cars. Back at the car, they talked about their experiences. One of Celia's friends had a cat toy laser and was playing with it. They noticed lights appearing in the trees, forming a pattern. Two white lights followed by a deep red one. These were not flashlights or made by people. Then, the chain link fence started shaking violently. They drove away fast, feeling like something was following them. When they got home, everything seemed fine until they noticed strange happenings. There was something odd in the closet, and they often heard scratching and growling sounds coming from inside. Brutus, the dog, seemed perpetually scared in the house. Doors in the basement would open by themselves, especially the one near the dirt room. Stomping sounds came from different rooms, especially when someone was alone. People would hear their names being called while showering, particularly Celia. Celia's dark emotions seemed to fuel the entity. One night, during a power outage, Celia was alone with Brutus. She turned and saw a shapeless dark shadow moving over the furniture and drifting down the hall. Terrified, she grabbed Brutus and sat on the porch for hours until the others came home. They had rented the house to a guy before, but he left after a week, likely due to strange experiences. Celia often had dreams that seemed to predict the future or give her warnings. Despite her struggles, she managed to turn her life around, finding her faith in Christ again. This newfound faith seemed to keep the darkness at bay. Years later, Celia, now stronger in her faith, decided to confront her past. She returned to Greenwood Cemetery, this time during the day. Armed with her faith and determination, she sought to make peace with whatever haunted her. She prayed over the graves, asking for forgiveness and offering her apologies. As she prayed, she felt a cold breeze and saw the misty shapes of the dogs again. This time, instead of fear, she felt a sense of peace. The dogs circled her, then disappeared into the mist. She knew then that she had made peace with the spirits of Greenwood Cemetery. Back home, the strange occurrences ceased. Brutus no longer seemed scared, and the house felt lighter. Celia's dreams became more positive, filled with hope and light. She continued her ghost hunts, but with a new purpose, helping spirits find peace.